Now, let's pivot
Okay.
and go to the 49er rumor of the day. And it's,
Is that a new segment on Niners Nightly now?
No, not a rumor of the day.
You
Because
should
there's not always
consider it.
rumors. We go with stat of the day.
I'm aware of stat of the day, Larry.
Stat of the
there.
day is
Every
really
night
good.
at 7:07. I'm right there.
It's actually at the end of the show. Come on.
Oh, I know.
It is. Well, that is 7:07.
You see?
That's right, because you're coming on next. You're listening
it's called
to
the
stat
bit.
of the day. Yeah. You're forced to listen to stat of the day.
I know.
But here you go. There's buzz around the Senior Bowl that the Niners may be sleepers in the T. Higgins sweepstakes if he hits free agency.
Okay.
With the Patriots, Commanders, Texans, and Chargers also in the mix, the Niners are mentioned as well. Mm-hmm. He played 12 games. We just mentioned incredible. Joe Burrow. Yeah, 73 receptions, 10 touchdowns. Didn't have 1,000 yards, 911 yards, but played opposite Jamar Chase. That has a lot to do with that.
Yeah.
I bring him up because this is also pretty interesting. Another God bless Tim Kawakami. And I don't know where all this is coming from. Maybe he had an article today. But he said, according to Tim Kawakami, more likely the 49ers will go with their basic plan, take somebody who can rush the passer at 11 or score touchdowns, one or the other. And the likeliest position for the 11th pick in the draft seems like it'll be defensive tackle. So maybe Walter Nolan, maybe Derek Harmon, maybe Kenneth Grant, maybe Mason Graham if they get lucky. I don't think they will, but it's possible.
Yeah.
But so he's kind of framing the 11th pick as D tackle or skill position guy. And the thing about that that's so interesting is there's going to be potentially, depending on where the quarterbacks go in this draft and how people view these linemen, there's a chance that like Teteroa McMillan, who's Jacob Cowing's teammate at Arizona, who's just an absolute monster at 6'5", 215, great receiver, huge talent.
He'd fit in. He has a hard time against man press.
But I mean, he could fall to 11. Tyler Warren, the Penn State tight end. He's a great player. Like, to me, he's Gronk 2.0. He could fall. Ashton Gianti, the best running back potentially in the best running back draft we've seen in a long time. He potentially could be there. I think he will be.
Oh, he absolutely will be there. I don't think he's
not
going
to the first round. Right.
I think that positional scarcity is going to kill him.
Luther Burden is out there as well from Missouri, and I think when they get into the workouts and people start digging deep, his stock is going to rise. So I guess the question is, do if you go skill position at 11, you're not going after T. Higgins. No. But if Mayoko says if they're going to go after one free agent, he thinks the guy that he would go after is Drew Dalman, the center. They have spent money on Weston Richburg in the past. They have spent money on Alex Mack. I don't know if that's going to be, I don't know if that's the direction, but I put out a poll question about this. And on basically, I just said, Mayoko says the Niners could splurge on one unrestricted. It would be Drew Dalman. Who would you sign? I gave them Drew Dalman, T. Higgins, Justin Reed, and Javon Holland. And let's see where it's at right now.
You missed the best possible one.
What, you say Khalil Mack or something?
No.
What do you got?
Trey Smith.
The guard. Okay, but he's not going anywhere. You think the Chiefs are letting him get out? That would surprise me.
I think he'll be an unrestricted free agent.
Yeah.
I think he's going to want to see the market, and I think that someone's going to give him $22 million a year, and I think he'd have a hard time saying no.
So
and I know that the Niners would
Drew
never
Dalman
do
has
that,
67%. T. Higgins 17.7%. Justin Reed was one of the choices, 7.8%. Javon Holland 7.6%.
I'm not the biggest Holland guy, but yeah, I get where you're coming from.
He's local though. He went to O'Dowd. He probably would sign here for probably cheaper.
Maybe, or he knows all too well that he shouldn't go cheap and living in the Bay Area. So. Yeah, they have good options, and they need to spend that money. It's all the more reason for the cost certainty with Brock. As that pushes forward, I think Dalman would be a great one. My man Hutch has been all over Dalman for months now, thinking that he's the guy. It's certainly a position of need. It's a position that doesn't strike me as rich in the NFL draft. Like, I like a lot of the centers, but not one of them strike me as like, oh, you could start him in week 1 or, in week 6 this upcoming season. I like the kid out of Boston College a lot. I think he's
Kendall.
Kendall. I mean, where's Kendall going to go? He's like a day 3 guy.
Yeah.
So,
maybe, 4th round.
I mean, that's called being too cute by half, which I've been accused of doing in the past, saying, "Oh, you just get your starting center in the 4th round," So,
well, I mean, you never know. I mean,
options.
Yeah, there are a lot of good options. I mean, it depends. I mean, do they want to go with a bigger bodied center? I mean, I know I would like to see that. First of all, I think the Niners should have they have a meeting about the ball. They should have an emergency meeting about the fucking goal line. If you're going to have a meeting about the ball, let's have an emergency meeting about the goddamn goal line, because you can't score on the goal line. You can't run on the goal line.
Right.
Excuse me, whatever alarms you can sound in the building start sounding, boop, boop. Do we have an alarm thing in here?
Team can't win in the trench. Might be an issue in the red zone.
We got to have a soundbite. There's got to be some kind of an alarm on
Hey, I don't know how you spend your money. You got to get one of those soundboards. You can be the next Paulie Mack.
I wish I had a soundboard. The show would be so much better if I had a soundboard.
It's easily attained in this day and age.
Hey, everything's just takes
Shopify.
cash.
Yeah. Would the show be better if you had a soundboard, Larry? I'm starting to question.
I think people would think the show is funnier if we use this all the time.
If we did a laugh track.
If we just did a laugh track just constantly. We're like a 70s sitcom every time you say anything.
I just walk into the room. Laugh track goes.
I don't know why they have this.
That's what it's like
Spice.
when I go in the Giants clubhouse.
Wow, Old Spice.
Pay
How did Old Spice get in there?
Well,
how about this? When you want to bounce somebody off the air, this would be great on the radio. Or
straight up gong show me.
Get out of here. All right. Thanks,
good.
Bob. Good to talk to you, Bob. Thanks for calling.
No, okay, listen. I think that there's a million ways this can go. I think that being dogmatic about pick number 11, the way that Kawakami is suggesting, right, and it's not his suggestion, is foolhardy, because every draft should be best player available, but this draft in particular should be best player available so long as they play in a trench.
Forget this best player available. Here's what this would be one. Let's simplify. Draft great players.
Correct.
Period. I don't care if you have duplicates. I don't care if you have 2 guys at the same spot. I don't care if I don't care. I don't care if the 4 picks that you make in a row are all on the defensive side of the ball. I don't care. Draft great players. Why are the Lions the Lions? Because of Brian Branch, because of Sam Laporta, because of Amon-Ra, because of Jahmyr Gibbs, because of Frank Ragnow. They went and got individual great players. It doesn't matter what position they play.
It wasn't
just
a big
get great
issue.
Players.
Wasn't an issue with the Lions of pushing anybody of quality out when they got the vast majority of those players. And I do think that you have to take into account some level of scarcity. But after a 6-win season, what are you being so precious about? If your guy can't beat a rookie, then he shouldn't be your guy. Go out and get a player that can help affect winning ASAP. And if you want to take a project or 2, go to town, but make sure you have winners in your building and guys who can at least be rotational, right? What's the rule of the first round? Immediate starter. Rule of day 2, immediate role player. And the rule of top 100 pick in general is you got to be able to make an impact on day 1.
My buddy, the late Bill Urbanek, worked for Al Davis, and he used to tell me some great Al Davis stories. And he worked for Al Davis a couple different times. And he coached Howie Long and Bill Pickel and all those guys when they were down there in the 80s, when the Raiders were still winning championships.
Yes.
And Bill used to tell me all about Al Davis, and he used to say that in the war room, Al Davis would call out a lot of his kind of less gutsy scouts and be like, "You guys like to hit singles. I like to hit home runs." And that's kind of the one thing I would say, if take more home run shots Stop drafting players. I think he could be. I think he might be able to make our club as a backup safety on special teams. No, go draft a guy who you think, maybe could be your best player. At some point, go draft somebody with some talent, and I don't care if they're not the right height or whatever. There's different things that are overvalued and undervalued, but go get great players and go get more speed. They're the slowest damn team.
Yes.
They can't. They're so slow on offense and they're so slow on defense. So it's a bad combination. They were the fastest team in football when they went to the Super Bowl against the Chiefs in Super Bowl 54. Niners and the Chiefs were the two fastest teams in football according to GPS. And they've lost a lot of that speed. They're really, really slow. So they got to get some big time speed. But that's interesting. Do you go D-line, which they always go D-line, or this is such a deep D-line draft. Like people would say to me, I had a guy who's a big Niner fan who loves to talk draft with me, and he sent me a note just like this morning or yesterday morning, I guess it was, saying, is it just Walter Nolan? And I'm like,
I love
no,
Walter
it's
Nolan.
not. I love Walter Nolan, but here's the thing: the Niners have to fill a bunch of needs, so they got to get great players. That's one, but then you also, you got to see, where there's some value and where you can get, you got to fill your needs. Like there are great defensive tackles that are going to be on day 2 and day 3, guys that can really play, guys who can, I think really, there's going to be really great depth at defensive tackle. So. If you passed on Mason Graham for Malachi Starks, just because you felt like you could get a defensive tackle later, whatever.
Got to understand the marketplace.
Yeah.
I mean, like a guy like Omar Norman Lott, the defensive tackle out of Tennessee, is exactly what they've needed. Now, is he flashy? Is he going to get you 7 sacks a year from defensive tackle? No. Would you love to have one of those guys like a Walter Nolan? Absolutely. But if you can get an Armand Membu and an Omar Norman Lott, now you have somebody who is able to plug and play at left guard ASAP and can get you to tackle when you finally need a tackle, which they did. They needed a guard to play tackle at one point this year. And you can get a guy like Norman Lott who could be a 2-gap player if the scheme asked for it.
They're super strong.
Just does an incredible job of just holding his fucking gap, which is something that the Niners have never done. They haven't had it since DeForest Buckner. They haven't had a gap holder since then. Hassan Ridgeway for maybe a day did it. And everyone else since then has just been like, I'm going to get to the backfield. Meanwhile, the running back is 5 yards past them at that point. So when you look at the depth in this draft, I love the corners. I think that there's a lot of depth at defensive tackle. I'm not over the moon on the edge guys right now, but I haven't dove all the way in yet. I think that there's some value to be found at safety, though I do think Starks is far and away the best option there. Wide receiver, super deep. I think there are guys on the 6th and 7th rounds who could be like big-time fantasy players this year at wide receiver. It is obscene. I'm not the biggest McMillan guy, and I don't think even there's that many first-round wide receivers. But day 2 and on, I mean, just there's too many. There's going to be very good wide receivers that don't get drafted because there's just too many of them. Great tight end draft, particularly at the top. This is a great opportunity for the Niners to load up. They don't want to spend money in the trenches. Okay, that's fine. You need to then load up at the draft, and this is the best possible draft to do it. Because there's a guy like, Donovan Jackson might be available in the 2nd or the 3rd round. I mean, he's a starting guard in the NFL day 1. And you can find him in the 2nd or the 3rd round because everyone wants to go with flash. And the skill position guys, as much as, people want to talk Genty and people are going to want to talk, I'll blast my own guy, Luther Burden here. Like the return on investment is minimal when you consider that you can get a bunch of good running backs on day 3. You can draft 2 of them for the price of nothing, for nickels. And one of them might hit. And the other one you can just cut. And wide receivers, you're going to get good ones late in day 3. Like, why would you invest serious capital on any of those guys, even if they are clearly the best at that position, when there is just not a positional scarcity there at all? Meanwhile, you're loaded up at tackle. There are a lot of edge players, but that's to everyone's taste. And again, I need to get into them more. And I love some linebackers in this. I mean, I can go on and on. I've been deep in it for the last week, but I think it'd be foolish if the Niners went with a skill position player, or at least a strict skill position player, like a running back or a wide receiver. I think that they need to heed the lesson of the Eagles and the Chiefs. They need to invest more near the ball. You think about what do the Eagles have? They have the best offensive line in football and the best 3-man defensive line in football. They got some war daddies up front with linebackers who can fill in because those guys hold their gas.
Carter, Cam Jurgens, high picks.
And then think about what the Chiefs have. Okay, so the Chiefs, they said, we'll just figure it out at wide receiver on the fly. But we're going to have the best. I mean, now obviously they've moved Thuney from guard to tackle because they had to. But they had the best left guard, the best center, and I would argue the best right guard in football on the same line. I mean, Thuney is unbelievable. Trey Smith is unbelievable. And Creed Humphrey is far and away the best center in football. And then what did they do? They go and they make sure that they have Chris Jones who can wreck the game. The closer you are to the football, the more important you are. I as much as we want to talk about the incredible skill and all the flash that these teams around the league have, and it is as exciting to watch as maybe ever with all of this speed and athleticism on the outside. The game is still won in the trenches, and it's particularly won on the inside of the trenches, especially, too, 49ers have to think about this. When you have, in your division, smaller quarterbacks, we'll see what happens with the Rams, we'll see what happens with Seattle, but at least Kyler's going to be here. He's small. I'd want to have somebody up in his face. And you yourself have a smaller quarterback, so you should protect him by making sure that you have 2 great guards and a great center. And you should attack everybody else from the middle because, yes, you have Bosa. Imagine what you could do if you had one other point of entry, and imagine how great it would be if it was up the middle.